I used to believe our home was the safest place in the world, a quiet corner of life where nothing sharp could reach us. In the evenings, when I walked through the front door, the first thing I always heard was her soft humming coming from the kitchen. It was never a full melody, just fragments, warm, familiar, comforting. She would turn toward me with that small, tired smile of hers, the one that made the whole day feel lighter. We had our routines, dinner together, her legs curled under her on the couch, my arm draped over the backrest, the two of us talking about nothing in particular. Ordinary things, harmless things, the kind of moments people take for granted until they disappear. On weekends, she liked to wake up early, long before I did, and open every curtain in the house. Sunlight spilled across the living room, like she wanted to convince the world we lived in an endless summer. She made coffee the same way every morning, too sweet for me, not sweet enough for her, and left mine on the counter with a sticky note that usually said something silly or affectionate. I saved some of them in a drawer, thinking I'd show them to our future children one day. Proof that love could be simple. We had plans back then. Small ones, but they felt big to us. A second car, a trip to the coast, maybe eventually a child. She talked about it more than I did, though always with a laugh, as if the idea scared her and thrilled her at the same time. I remember thinking how lucky I was to share my life with someone who dreamed in the same direction I did. But lately, something felt off. It began quietly, almost politely, like a change in weather you don't notice until you're already cold. She stopped humming in the evenings. She moved through the house with an absent look, as if her thoughts were someplace I couldn't reach. Conversation shortened. Smiles faded faster. When I touched her shoulder, she flinched, barely, but enough for me to feel it. At night, when she thought I was asleep, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her breathing uneven in the dark. And though nothing had happened yet, nothing I could name or accuse, I felt the first thin crack forming beneath the surface of our perfect silence. A small shift, a warning I couldn't interpret, but it was there, cold, faint, and growing. It was late when she finally sat beside me on the couch. Too late for real conversations, too late for anything meaningful. The kind of hour when people speak only if they're hiding something or about to confess. The TV flickered in front of us, casting pale light across her face. She wasn't watching it. She hadn't been watching for weeks. She took a slow breath, then another, as if rehearsing her own courage. I felt her weight shift closer, barely an inch, but enough to pull me out of that tired, half-awake calm I'd tried to wrap myself in. "Can I tell you something?" she asked quietly. Her voice didn't tremble, but the air around her did. I muted the TV without taking my eyes off her. She stared straight ahead, hands clasped tightly together, knuckles pale. "I've made a decision," she said. "Something important." A dull pressure tightened at the base of my skull. Instinct, warning, whatever name people give the moment their life tilts a few degrees off balance. I'd felt it once before, years ago, when a doctor called in the middle of the night. That same cold whisper crawling down the spine. "What decision?" I asked. She swallowed, her throat bobbing. I'm going to be a surrogate." The words landed so softly, so gently, they didn't make sense at first. Surrogate. Like she was telling me she'd switched laundry detergents. like it was a choice that didn't require my breath, my consent, my marriage. I turned my head toward her slowly. "For who?" I asked. She hesitated, just for a split second, but that hesitation said more than the words that followed. "It doesn't matter yet," she said. "What matters is that it's something good, something I feel called to do." Her eyes didn't meet mine. She kept them fixed on some point in the distance, as if afraid that looking at me would shatter her resolve, or reveal the truth she was burying under calm sentences. There was guilt in her voice, thin, almost invisible, but unmistakable. Guilt softens vowels, rounds consonants, makes people sound younger than they are. That's how she sounded. Like someone trying to slide a confession past me before I noticed it was loaded. "You already made arrangements," I said. It wasn't a question. She flinched, a tiny movement, barely noticeable, but I saw it. "I've been thinking about it for a while," she whispered. "And I've started the paperwork." That was the moment something inside me cooled. Not rage, not yet. Just a quiet, steady drop in temperature, like a room losing heat after someone leaves the door open on a freezing night. "Why didn't you talk to me first?" I asked. She finally looked at me, and the eyes I saw weren't the ones I married. They were guarded, fogged, carrying a secret she wasn't ready to admit. "I didn't want you to stop me," she said softly. And just like that, the perfect silence of our life cracked a little deeper. For 2 days after that conversation, she moved around the house like a shadow. Too careful, too quiet. As if she feared that one wrong sound would force the truth out of her. I watched her from a distance, not questioning, not pressing, because something in her hesitation told me the truth was already there, waiting like a trapped animal behind her ribs. On the third night, the silence finally shattered. I came home earlier than usual. Her car was outside, engine still ticking from recent use. She was in the kitchen, hunched over a stack of papers she hadn't heard me approach. Medical forms, consent forms, clinic letters with her signature already printed neatly at the bottom. She looked up and froze. "Why didn't you tell me you'd already signed everything?" I asked. Her lips parted, but the explanation she'd prepared wasn't ready. She tried to slide the papers away, but I laid my hand on them. Calmly. Too calmly. "Who is the father?" I said. I didn't raise my voice, didn't move closer, didn't threaten. Just asked a question that felt like pushing a knife into warm wax. She inhaled, slow, shaky, and for a moment, I believed she'd lie. Say it was a stranger, a couple, that it didn't matter, that I shouldn't make this harder. But instead she whispered a name I hadn't heard in years. Evan, her ex, the man who broke her heart long before I knew her. The one she never thought about anymore. The room tilted, just slightly. Enough for me to feel the ground slip. I stared at her, waiting for her to correct herself. Say it was someone else. Say she misspoke. But she kept talking, filling the space with explanations I didn't ask for. "He reached out months ago," she said softly. "He and his wife can't have children. They've tried everything, and I couldn't turn my back on that kind of pain." She looked at me with pleading eyes, as if expecting me to understand. Accept. Approve. "You're doing this for him," I said. "For them," she corrected quickly. "It's an act of kindness." I felt something tighten low in my chest. Not an explosion, not fury, but something colder, denser. A quiet, concentrated hatred that slid into place like a slow-moving glacier. You went to the clinic behind my back, I said. You signed legal documents. You started treatments. I was afraid you'd say no, she whispered. And that mattered less than helping him. Her face crumpled. It's not like that. But it was exactly like that. I could see it now. Every late-night message she thought I didn't notice. Every sudden smile at her phone. Every unexplained drive across town. All the puzzle pieces she never meant me to find. And yet she stood there, expecting praise for her generosity, expecting me to call this noble, selfless, pure. In that moment, something inside me cooled in a way I didn't know was possible. Love didn't vanish. It froze, turned sharp, turned into something I could hold without feeling warmth. A quiet hatred. Precise. Patient. The kind that doesn't scream. The kind that waits.
After she spoke Evan's name out loud, something in the house shifted. It wasn't visible, not at first, but the air felt different, thinner, colder. Rooms that once felt warm now echoed slightly, as if emptied of something essential. Maybe trust, maybe love, maybe both. She began her preparations almost immediately. Early morning appointments, blood tests, sonograms, phone calls she took behind closed doors, always with the same soft tone she used to reserve for me. I didn't ask questions. I didn't interrupt. I simply watched. She mistook my silence for shock or hesitation. She kept offering explanations no one requested, trying to patch a sinking ship with scraps of words. It's just hormones. They said it's normal. It's only a consultation, nothing final yet. I'm doing this for the right reasons. You know that, don't you? I never answered, and she began to fear the absence of my voice more than any argument we could have had. One afternoon, I came home and saw her in the living room with Evan. He sat too comfortably on our couch, his body angled toward her in the way men lean toward what they still want. She had her hand on a stack of clinic papers, explaining something to him in that small, earnest voice she used when she wanted to be understood. They both froze when they noticed me. I didn't say a thing. Not hello, not a question, not an accusation. I walked past them, took off my jacket with deliberate slowness, hung it on the hook by the stairs. I heard them whisper after I left the room, her voice anxious, his uncertain. She followed me later, asking if I wanted to talk. Talk. Words are gifts, and she no longer deserved gifts. I had learned something vital in those days. Shouting gives the other person power. Rage exposes the wound. Anger confirms that they mattered enough to break you. But silence is a blade. A clean one. It doesn't shake. It doesn't slip. It simply cuts. So I let days pass without engaging. I watched her fill prescriptions, inject hormones into her thigh, press gauze to the red marks she tried to hide under her clothes. I watched her stumble from fatigue, breathe shallowly from nausea, stagger through the house with trembling fingers. Every step of her preparation chipped away at what she thought we still had. In the mornings, she waited for me to ask where she was going. I didn't. At night, she hovered in doorways, hoping I'd say I was hurt, angry, confused, anything that could mean she still held a piece of me. But the truth was simple. This house was no longer ours, just a structure we both occupied, a place where she prepared to carry another man's child, and where I learned that silence, when used correctly, can hollow a person out far faster than cruelty ever could. The clinic called on a Thursday. I remember because she almost dropped the phone when she answered it, her hands shaking with a kind of excitement I hadn't seen from her in months. When she hung up, she turned toward me with tears in her eyes. Not grief, not fear, but joy. It worked, she whispered. The implantation was successful. She waited for something from me, a smile, a nod, a word. Anything. When I gave her nothing, her expression faltered, but only for a moment. The glow returned almost instantly, brighter than before. Her happiness didn't need my approval. It came from someplace I no longer existed. Within days, Evan began showing up more often. Too often. Sometimes he brought groceries, the expensive organic kind she liked. Sometimes vitamin packs or clinic documents she forgot to mention to me. Sometimes small gifts meant to make her comfortable. A heated blanket, her favorite herbal tea, a stupid soft pillow shaped like a cloud. He stood in the doorway each time, smiling with that rehearsed gentleness men use when they're trying to look harmless. And she lit up for him. Every single time. I watched all of it quietly, the way a man watches fish drift behind aquarium glass, detached, motionless, studying lives that had no relation to his own. Their voices became background noise. Their excitement, their plans, their anxious whispers, all of it blurred into something distant and strangely irrelevant. They assumed my silence meant resignation, maybe even acceptance. They were wrong. Silence was simply the first step, the foundation of something far colder. One evening, I came home to find them at the dining table, heads bent over ultrasound instructions. She was smiling, that soft, intimate smile that used to belong only to me. Evan leaned closer than necessary, pointing at something on the page. Her hand brushed his absently, naturally, as if her body remembered him better than it remembered her vows. I stood in the doorway long enough for both of them to notice. She jerked her hand back. He stiffened, cleared his throat, muttered something about leaving soon. I didn't say a word, just walked past them, took a glass from the shelf, and filled it with water as calmly as if they weren't even there. When I finally looked up, they both stared at me. She with guilt, he with unease. I held their gaze for a moment, expression blank, then set the glass down and left the room. No confrontación, no acusaciones, nothing they could dismiss as overreaction. Because I'd learned something crucial. A storm announced loudly can be prepared for, but a silent one destroys everything before you understand what's happening. She thought I was withdrawing. Evan thought I was defeated. Both believed they were building a small future together inside the shell of my home. But what they didn't know, not yet, was that I'd already started dismantling everything around them. Quietly, patiently, precisely. Sometimes destruction begins not with a blow, but with a man simply watching and waiting and letting everyone believe he's no longer a threat. By the time her pregnancy reached its 12th week, the house no longer felt like a home. It felt like a shell, hollow, echoing, drained of warmth. She moved through it slower now, one hand always pressed to her stomach, the other reaching for support whenever dizziness overtook her. And she tried, more than once, to reach for me. "Can you help me with this?" she asked one morning, struggling to lift a basket of laundry. I walked past her without pausing. Later, she knocked on the bedroom door, voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "Can we talk? Please? I need to understand where you are, what you're feeling." I didn't open the door, didn't answer, didn't move. Eventually, her steps retreated down the hallway, uneven and unsteady. The silence between us became a living thing, sharp-edged, heavy, impossible to ignore. She tried to break it again and again, but every attempt only made it grow thicker. Her mother came next. She arrived unannounced, her expression already twisted with judgment. She cornered me in the kitchen, her voice rising with every sentence. "She is carrying a child. Do you understand that? She's exhausted. She is in pain. And you," she jabbed a finger in my chest, "you act like she's invisible, like she deserves this treatment." I didn't respond. I simply looked at her with the same emptiness I'd shown her daughter. That unsettled her more than if I'd shouted. "God help you," she snapped, backing away, shaking her head. "I don't know what kind of man you've become." I didn't bother correcting her, because she was wrong. This wasn't a new version of me. This was simply the version she'd never had reason to meet. A few days later, Evan knocked on my door. Hard, insistent. I opened it, but only halfway. "Can we talk?" he asked, jaw clenched, trying to sound composed. Man to man. I didn't speak. He shifted on his feet, clearly thrown off by my silence. "Look, I know this situation is complicated, and I get that you're hurt. But she needs stability, and frankly, your behavior is." He stopped when he saw my face. No anger, no tensión, just a blank, icy stare that made his words die in his throat. He swallowed. The confident posture collapsed just a little. "I'm trying here," he muttered. but I still didn't answer. And something in him cracked, not loudly, not visibly, but unmistakably. He stepped back from the door like he'd touched something burning. "Forget it," he said quietly. "This is pointless." He walked away, shoulders tight, and for the first time I saw fear in him too, a quiet recognition that he had miscalculated, that he didn't understand the man standing in front of him. But she understood, at least a little. That night, she approached me in the living room, her eyes red, her breath trembling. She didn't ask for help, didn't try to reason. She just stood there, staring at me like she was finally seeing the shape of the thing she'd created. "Please," she whispered, "don't look at me like that." I didn't look away. She pressed a hand to her stomach, as if shielding the child inside from the cold radiating between us. And for the first time since it all began, she stepped back from me. Not in anger, not in resentment, but in fear. Fear of silence. Fear of consequence. Fear of the man she thought she still knew and no longer did. The walls around us didn't just feel cold that night. They felt honest. Her pregnancy moved forward the way seasons change, slowly at first, then all at once. By the beginning of the second trimester, she could barely hide her discomfort. Swollen feet, constant nausea, a stiffness in her back that made her wince every time she stood up. And the nights were the worst. I would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the muffled sound of her crying from the guest room. It wasn't loud, never desperate enough to wake the whole house. But it was persistent, a fragile, exhausted weeping that seeped through the walls and settled in the dark corners of the hallway. She didn't just cry. She whispered my name sometimes, not loudly, not with expectation, just a soft, trembling sound, as if the memory of who I used to be might answer her. I never did. When I passed her in the mornings, her eyes were swollen, her voice hoarse. She would reach out, not physically, but with words spoken too gently, too hopefully. "Can we talk today? Can you sit with me for a few minutes? Please just say something." But I remained exactly what I had become, a stone wall she couldn't climb anymore. And the house responded to that tension. It grew quieter, heavier. Doors closed a little harder than necessary. Cabinets slammed when she thought I wasn't listening. The air filled with chemical smells, vitamins, creams, hormone injections, prenatal meds. All those bottles scattered across countertops like reminders of the life growing inside her and the life rotting between us. Sometimes I caught her staring at me from across the room, as if trying to measure how much of me was left, how much damage she had actually done. But I gave her nothing. No anger, no softness, no hint of the man she once loved. Silence became our language, and she was the only one suffocating in it. One night, long after midnight, she knocked on my door. Not urgently, more like someone tapping just to prove they still existed. "Can I come in?" she asked. I didn't answer. She opened the door anyway and stood in the doorway, trembling. Her hands shook as she held onto the frame. Her belly was round now, visible beneath her loose shirt. Her breathing caught. "I can't do this alone," she whispered. I thought you'd forgive me eventually, or at least speak to me. But this," she gestured around us at the silent house, at me. "This is killing me." I looked at her, just looked. No emotion, no reaction. She covered her mouth as her face crumpled. A small, broken sound escaped her. She backed away slowly, as if retreating from a cliff she finally realized she had stepped too close to. And when she left the doorway, when her footsteps faded down the hall, I understood something she had not yet grasped. She feared I might leave, but I had no intention of leaving. Leaving would have freed her. Leaving would have given her a way out. No, Istaya. I lived beside her, a quiet presence, a reminder, a shadow that didn't touch her, didn't comfort her, didn't acknowledge her suffering. And she understood it at last. I wouldn't abandon her. I would simply stay long enough for her to break on her own. The contractions began just after midnight. At first, they were soft, a low, strained groan from the hallway, a sound barely strong enough to pull me from sleep. I lay still, listening. The groan came again, sharper this time, followed by the frantic shuffle of her feet against the wooden floorboards. She knocked on my bedroom door. Not the hesitant knock she used in the early months. No, this one was raw, urgent, trembling. "Please," she gasped. "I need help." I opened the door slowly. She stood hunched over, one hand gripping her belly, the other pressed against the wall to keep herself upright. Sweat clung to her forehead. Her breathing came in short, panicked bursts. "They're close together," she whispered. I called Evan. "He's not answering. My mom's asleep. I don't know what to do. Please take me to the hospital." For a moment, I just looked at her. Her fear, her pain, her desperation. Then I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, the cold settling in my chest like ice water. "Call the man you got pregnant for," I said quietly. "Let him handle it." Her eyes widened in horror. She shook her head, a tear sliding down her cheek. "He's not picking up. I can't get there in time. Grant, please, I'm begging you." Another contraction struck, folding her in half. She let out a strangled cry and grabbed at my arm. Not for affection, but survival. I stepped back. She fell to her knees. Her breathing turned into panicked sobs. "Don't do this. Not now. Not tonight. I know you hate me, but please, please don't let something happen to this baby." "The baby isn't mine," I said, "and neither is the responsibility." Silence followed. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that cracks something inside a person. She stared at me as if seeing a stranger, someone far crueler than she imagined she deserved. But cruelty was her interpretation. To me, it was balance. A consequence finally returned. After a long moment, she fumbled for her phone, hands trembling, and called emergency services. Her voice broke as she tried to explain the pain, the timing, the distance. I walked back to my bed. By the time paramedics arrived, she was curled on the hallway floor, clutching her belly and crying openly. They asked what happened, why she was alone. I pretended to be asleep. The sound of their footsteps, the clatter of equipment, the hurried voices, all of it faded behind my closed door. Moments later, the front door shut, and the house fell silent again. I lay on my pillow, eyes open in the dark. Not anxious, not conflicted, just still. Hours passed. Near dawn, my phone buzzed once. A brief message from her mother about complications, about stress, about uncertainty. I turned the phone face down and let the notification die without reading the rest. When sunlight finally drifted across the room, I rose, showered, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table as if it were any other morning. No panique, no racing thoughts, just the quiet hum of the house that felt strangely peaceful. While she labored through a night of fear and pain, surrounded by strangers, fighting to bring another man's child into the world, I slept more soundly than I had in months. She came home 3 days after the delivery, pale and trembling, holding the newborn in a carrier she could hardly lift. I heard the door open, the soft cry of the infant, the uneven rhythm of her breath as she stepped inside. I didn't go to meet her. I stayed in the living room, listening to the quiet chaos spilling into the hallway. When she appeared in the doorway, she looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, but in spirit. Hollowed out, bruised in ways no doctor could document. "He's supposed to pick her up tomorrow," she said, voice cracking. "Evan, he said he just needs time to sort things out. His wife, they're fighting. He wants to wait until things calm down." I nodded once, without looking at her. It was the only acknowledgement I gave. That night the baby cried for hours. A thin, desperate wail that cut through the walls like a blade. She paced the hallway with slow, uneven steps, whispering please, 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 as if the child understood human words. Every now and then her voice pitched into panic, then softened, then broke. Evan didn't call. Not the next day. Not the day after. Not the week after. His silence stretched on, a coward's distance disguised as needing space. She left him messages, some pleading, some angry, some barely coherent, but he answered none of them. His absence pressed into the house like a damp fog, heavy and suffocating. She checked her phone, so often her fingers trembled. And every time the screen stayed dark, something inside her dimmed too. I watched all of it. The sleepless nights, the trembling hands, the panic whenever the baby wouldn't take a bottle. The slow collapse of a woman who believed she was doing something noble. But I didn't interfere. I didn't offer help, or sympathy, or even the illusion of support. I sat at the table some evenings, sipping tea, while she rocked the screaming infant just a few feet away, exhaustion twisting her features into something unrecognizable. She would glance at me, hope flickering in her eyes like a dying flame, but I never met her gaze for long. One night, after nearly 2 weeks without a word from Evan, she approached me in the living room. Her steps were unsteady, the baby pressed to her chest, her face streaked with tears she didn't bother to wipe. "Grant!" Her voice cracked on my name. "I'm sorry." The words hung in the air, thin and trembling, like something fragile enough to break with a breath. "I didn't think he'd disappear," she whispered. "I didn't think it would be like this. I didn't think—" Her voice failed. She swallowed hard, trying again. "I was wrong. I see that now. I know I hurt you. I know I ruined everything. I don't know how to come back from this." I looked at her then, really looked, as she stood there unraveling in front of me, the child crying weakly in her arms, her own tears falling freely. But my expression didn't change. No pity, no anger, no words, just emptiness. She stared at me for a long moment, searching my face for something, a flicker of forgiveness, a shadow of the man she once knew, any sign that her apology had meaning. But there was nothing to find. Her knees buckled slightly. She held the baby tighter and turned away, shoulders shaking, stumbling back down the hallway into the dim glow of the nursery lamp. The house fell silent again, except for the newborn's cries echoing faintly through the walls. And for the first time, she finally understood. Whatever she broke inside me, she couldn't fix it now. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon, the kind of ordinary day when life pretends nothing monumental is about to shift. She was in the nursery, rocking the baby with slow, mechanical movements, her eyes vacant from exhaustion. Her phone buzzed once, then again. She hesitated before answering. I watched from the doorway, unseen, as her expression collapsed. It was Evan, or rather, his final message. He wasn't coming. He wasn't taking the baby. He wasn't assuming responsibility. His new partner had given him an ultimatum. No more contact, no more involvement, no more reminders of a mistake she wanted buried. And Evan, as always, chose the path of least resistance, letting someone else carry the weight of his cowardice. The phone slipped from her hands onto the carpet. She sank to the edge of the crib, shaking, clutching the newborn against her chest. A broken sound escaped her, not quite a sob, not quite a scream, something raw and wordless like grief stripped of language. "I don't know what to do," she whispered into the baby's hair. "I don't know how to fix this." There was no one left to answer her. Her family was tired, stretched thin, angry at her choices. Her ex was gone. Her friends avoided the topic entirely. And I, the man who once would have carried her through any storm, stood quietly at the threshold, watching. Not with hatred, not with triumph, just with the cold, steady clarity of someone who had already stepped beyond forgiveness. That night, after she finally fell asleep in the nursery chair, the baby cradled awkwardly in her arms, I sat at the dining table and opened the folder I had prepared weeks earlier. Every document was in place. Bank records showing her secret withdrawals, receipts for clinic payments she hid from me, signed forms with forged initials where mine should have been, a timeline of every deception, every lie, every step she took to build a future that had no space for me. I filed for divorce the next morning. When she was served the papers, she stood in the kitchen shaking so hard the pen nearly fell from her fingers. She tried to speak, to argue, to explain, to beg, but no words came out. Only silence, a mirror of the silence I had given her for months. I didn't soften, didn't comfort, didn't pretend this was anything but inevitable. During the proceedings, everything unfolded with chilling simplicity. The court noted her financial deception. They noted the misuse of joint funds. They noted her decision to prioritize another man's child over her marriage. By the end, the ruling was clear. The house, mine. Custody of our children, mine. Her visitation, limited. Her petitions for support denied. She left the courthouse in tears, the newborn on her shoulder, her mother guiding her toward their car as if she might collapse without help. I watched her go, not with cruelty, not with satisfaction, just with a final, exhausted understanding that whatever connection once tied us together had been severed long before the judge ever picked up her pen. Within a week, she moved back to her parents' home, a small house crowded with old furniture and older disappointments. She had no partner, no stability, no future plan. Only a child who wasn't hers to keep and a life reduced to ashes of her own making. People asked later if I felt anything: regret, relief, vindication. I rarely answered, because the truth was simple. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need revenge in the loud, theatrical sense. I only needed silence. Silence to watch her choices unravel. Silence to let her see what she destroyed. Silence to become the consequence she never expected. In the end, silence did what rage never could. Silence proved louder than any revenge.